Welcome to episode 46 of the Hard Truth About B2B e-commerce. I'm your co-host, Isaiah Bollinger, and I'm here with Tim in our rainy East Coast house.
Hey, yes, hi, this is Timothy Peterson. Welcome to another episode of the Hard Truth About B2B e-commerce. So I'm going to just dive in with a sponsor mention right at the start. Just have talk about our friends at Punch Out To Go. They're a global B2B integration company specializing in connecting commerce business platforms with e-procurement and ERP applications. Punch Out To Go's iPaaS technology seamlessly links business applications to automate the flow of purchasing data. And with their solution, you can immediately reduce integration complexities for Punch-Out catalogs, electronic purchase orders, invoices, and other B2B sales order automation documents to accelerate your business results. Thank you to our sponsor. And guess what? We have a new sponsor. It's joined us beginning with this episode. Isaiah, would you like to give a shout out to them?
Definitely. This is exciting. It's our first new sponsor. We're finally kind of getting some traction here where we're starting to get a little bit more visitors and eyeballs. So we're excited to announce Balance, who is our newest sponsor. And what they've done is they've taken the challenge out of building your B2B e-commerce store, specifically around payments, and really solve that problem. So as everyone knows in B2B e-commerce, the more flexibility you offer your customers, the more it'll show in your bottom line. But generally that's been tough historically, but not now with the advancements of Balance and getbalance.com. So with Balance, we can offer pretty much all the major payment methods you would want for B2B, like ACH, wire, checks, and cards, but also like term and credit terms, and all sorts of other incentives. And on top of that, it's an awesome looking experience. It's the first B2B e-commerce dedicated payment platform that's truly dedicated to B2B e-commerce. Whereas, as you know, most of the other payment gateways are focused on kind of the retail experience. And it's a seamless, quick checkout, led by some of the leaders in B2B e-commerce. So you can check them out at getbalance.com, book a session, and really get whatever you want from a payments and checkout perspective at getbalance.com. So definitely check them out. They're newer tech startup, really cool company. And ironically, our guest today, who has a relationship with Balance, so which was not planned, by the way. That had nothing.
It was not the plan, listeners, but it just happened. So we have the joy of having Josh Penfold here, CEO of Goose at goose.farm. I hope I have the URL correct, goose.farm. And one of the hottest startups in B2B today. I'm just going to give him a big pitch right now. And Josh, I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself and Goose. Just give us a little sense for our listeners of your background and what led you to starting Goose, and then just a little bit about what Goose is, and then we can dive in.
Well, thanks, guys, for having me. It's great to be here. Yep, you got the domain rights. I like to joke with people, the .com was too expensive, so we bought the farm instead. Which buying the farm is a good thing or the bad thing, but it worked for us. And I was a little worried at first, but people remember it really well. So 2 small words, and it wasn't really expensive to buy it, so we stuck with it. But yeah, Josh Penfold. I am here to talk about B2B e-commerce, which is, I guess, present since we're in a B2B e-commerce podcast. I've been in e-commerce probably for around 15 years now, at least. It's been a while. I've done startups myself in the past, launched a drop shipping e-commerce site back when drop shipping was this evil word that brands threw out there. I had so many brand managers and CEOs calling me up when I launched it saying, "You can't sell our products online. What are you doing? Only dealers can carry B2B products. What are you doing? No one will ever buy that. You need 10 days of training and buy a partner fees and licenses." I'm like, I just sold 500,000 in the past 2 months. Oh, okay. We like you. Join our partner program. Come to Miami and go to our trade show. I'm like, okay.
Good start. I like that.
It was. So I did that for a couple of years. And then, as everyone well knows, e-commerce kind of shifted a little bit back 5 years ago. More brands started selling direct online instead of going through channel partners. And being a channel partner, I saw that writing on the wall. And I said, hey, you know what? I'm really good at selling B2B. I'm even better at knowing what dealers do to get around manufacturers and mess up the channel. I always said that one bad actor can destroy, selling $10,000 of stuff could destroy millions of dollars of the value for that brand. So, you know what? I'll go work for brands. I'm like the thief that gets reformed and goes to work for the police. So I went to work for a B2B brand called Carlstar Group. They own the Carlisle, Krager, ITP brands in the automotive and power sports space. Built some B2B channels with them from scratch. Which, funny story on that one, I was at the job for 2 days, had just moved my family down from Buffalo, New York, down to Tennessee. And I told them they had to scrap $1 million of the work on a Magento site to start from scratch because it had such a bad performance and just wasn't working right. So I thought I was going to be fired my third day, but luckily they believed in me and went on to launch a good B2B channel, launched Amazon channel, an eBay channel, which to my own horn a little bit, I was able to make more margin on an eBay channel selling scratch and dent goods than they were making on their retail channel. So it's amazing.
I love that bit of trivia, Josh. That's one of my favorite things. I absolutely love that you made more margin on scratch and dent. You were so good.
Just those taking pieces and combining together what the customers wanted. I mean, who would ever thought that an excess amount of snow tires that we had because of a bad winter one year had a really big market in the go-kart industry. And they were paying a premium for it. Snow tires, just for a snowboard, just happened to match up pretty well.
That's funny.
But most B2B companies don't see that.
And so tell us about Goose. Obviously you have a lot of experience on your own and for some pretty large companies. I think there's another one that you worked at that was even larger in B2B, but then you transitioned to your own. What made you decide to leave these maybe cushy jobs, relative to your own thing?
I left Carlisle. I went to Philips for a while and helped manage their $500 million channel and the operations here in Nashville. At one point, I decided that I can't really do much change in big organizations, and I'm more about startups. So I've had this idea for the past probably 6-7 years now, redoing how B2B works. And so what I did was last April is I put a call out on April 1st. And at first, everybody thought it was a joke during COVID hit. I said, hey, we have thousands and thousands of people out of work. They're sitting here doing nothing during the COVID when it first hits. They're all bored out of their minds, worried if they have a job or not. So I said, hey, let's build something. So I got 100 people together on a Slack group, all e-commerce experts, ranging from B2C, B2B, supply chain, the works. And we brainstormed for weeks on what we could do to help these small retailers weather COVID. And what we found out is we couldn't help them very much because they didn't have time or infrastructure to do it. So I dusted off this little idea I had and said, hey, what if we did this instead for B2B? Let's help brands work better with these small retailers, dealers, integrators, regardless of the space, and give them more time back and fix those pain points that I had in B2B, which to me was always onboarding new customers, getting them to buy in the first place. I mean, everybody here in B2B has the old challenge of saying the customers hate using the website. You could spend thousands of dollars and hours of time, and I'm sure you guys see this at Trellis as well, but then the customers don't want to use it because one, it's a challenge often because they have to visit 10, 20 different B2B websites every week. I mean, the big guys, they may have EDI and direct API integrations or punch outs, but most people don't. I mean, EDI is expensive. And then when it does work, it's got 50% dropout or higher. Mm-hmm. And so these purchasers are going to websites every week. And I heard it all the time as e-commerce manager that we love your site. It's just, I hate visiting 20 sites a week. And then as a brand, we'd offer, hey, we'll give you a 1% discount on all your products if you order online, just to entice them to shop. And which is still cheaper than paying for customer service reps to do manual order entry. which is what, 50, $60 an order on average we were seeing. So it was a challenge. And then the other thing I saw was whenever you wanted to onboard a new dealer, I mean, everybody here, I'm sure, understands the exact same thing. They send a request in, you send a message back, you attach a dealer form, they fill it out, copy the PDF, or in most cases, print it out, fill it out in pen, send it back, it gets data entered back in the system. Then someone reviews it, channel manager, then it gets sent over to pricing. They set up pricing, and then it goes customer service to put in the ERP system, and then it goes to IT to get them set up on the e-commerce websites. And it's a week to 2 week process on a brand.
It's a frustrating process, and sometimes just even getting a quote is painful. Like I've got a couple things that I'm doing on the side for fun, and we're looking for wholesale cards actually for one of these things that I'm doing, and like getting the wholesale pricing, getting a quote is like painful.
It is.
I want to give one, thing for the historical record. I want to give some points to Josh. So, early on in COVID, you mentioned the whole like call out online and say, let's do something together. Let's figure this out. Here we all are, at home, early COVID. And that was really amazing, I have to say, because I joined that Slack group early on. There were so many people who were just like ready to chat and ready to talk about these things. And it's a model that really took off during COVID. You were really one of the pioneers in that. So many people just said, let's get together and figure something out. And, here you are as an example of someone who actually has something that resulted from it, and we're, a year plus later. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I think it's great for collaboration. And also kind of shocked too is I had several people reach out to me saying, thanking me for doing it. Not so much for the business part of it, saying, hey, it kept me something to do. It kept myself sane when everything was going on. Say, hey, it kept my mind thinking and kept me positive instead of just sitting there doing nothing and wondering what's going to happen.
That's awesome.
Just one other quick note on that too. I mean, I personally am aware of a couple other businesses that did the same thing that now exists, which is great. And also nonprofits. People really got together to say, how do we help other people out who are in, really unusual situations. So one of the best delivery type businesses that I heard of, was specifically focused on the elderly, early in COVID, things like that. I don't think it would have happened unless there was this crisis and this moment for people to get together. And it was great. And I really think that's a fantastic thing.
Great. So what we ended up building was based on my experience with the brands and the troubles they had with onboarding dealers, is I started to take all these challenges that I had at Carlisle Phillips. It was the same from a $500 million company, a $20 million company, up to a $18 billion company in the healthcare space. Everything was manual. Even with 7 Salesforce instances and 12 ERP systems, it was all done manually in spreadsheets and shared folders. So, the challenge I came up with was the brands want control of the experience. They want to be able to have an e-commerce platform where they control basic look at the site. They control who's onboarding, who they work with. It's not a free-for-all. They want to be able to onboard customers easily, have custom pricing lists based on a contract or per customer, and they want to have basic control. The other options is they can send it to a marketplace, and there's several out there in the retail space, for example, like Fair, Tundra, Abound, and a zillion other ones. But by doing that, or even Amazon, you're giving up control. They're basically saying that customer is now that marketplace's customer. You have to work with them on that marketplace. They own the data. They're going to charge a 15 to 25% commission for doing so, and you have to abide by their policies. Because in reality, they're just a digital sales rep, and they're taking the sale, and you're almost competing against them as a brand because you either direct customers to them and then they own it, or you sell direct. And if they sell direct, they own the convincing the customer to get the eyeballs on your site is expensive.
Yeah, and then they can take those customers and upsell them and turn them into. It's great for the marketplaces because then they don't care about that one sale. They care about getting this customer, and then they're selling them all the million other things on the marketplace.
Exactly. So what I did with Goose is I took that aspect from a brand wanting an experience like you would get on Magento or Hybris or BigCommerce or even Shopify. And the customers want one place to shop, and that's why they use a marketplace. They want to do all the procurement in one spot. I say procurement for a reason because to me, B2B e-commerce is not so much about e-commerce as it is about procurement. So you have two steps of your B2B. You have someone who's buying supplies for your business, and you're doing a consumer type purchase. You just happen to be a business doing it. The second way, which is really what B2B e-commerce is at its core, is about a business ordering parts and supplies to resell or make them money. So it's a totally different atmosphere, and you have to, I think, approach it that way. So the buyer in that situation wants one simple place, least number of clicks to reorder, to buy from all their vendors at once, and not have to visit 20 different sites. Because even if those 20 different sites have used the best UX design principles, the best practices across the board in e-commerce, that customer still has to learn 15, 20 different workflows to check out. And that's why they like Amazon. When I was at Carlisle and a little bit of Phillips, I was noticing all my direct consumer channels, like on eBay and Amazon, a very large percentage of those was going to B2B wholesale dealers and integrators. So imagine the entire business. You go to a tire shop to get a tire for your trailer, and you think they're going to some wholesaler to put your tires for your trailer, and it'll be a couple days to get in. In reality, that guy's going on eBay, ordering some stuff on eBay, and then throwing it on your trailer. Because one, either they didn't know where to purchase that product because it's not their main line, or if they work with distribution, they're so hard to work with, unless you're a really big customer, that pricing is out of whack and the whole experience is just as bad as the manufacturer direct. So seeing that, I said, okay, the buyers want a marketplace experience and they want to buy stuff in all one place. So what I did with Goose is I made it so that the brand sees a SaaS-based experience. So they control the pricing. They have onboarding tools to simplify all the customers they work with. So a customer fills out the application once, and they can use that for every vendor they work with. Sort of like you're applying for jobs on LinkedIn, quick apply. You do a resume once, you click a button for every time you want to apply for it. Unlike a traditional marketplace, in order to buy on the marketplace, you have to get approval from that brand for that product, just as you would in a traditional channel now. And they can set your custom pricing, get you set up. And then on the buyer side, they can go in there and search, find new suppliers, apply to connect, have a shared cart experience. They can order from 5, 10, 15 different vendors at once and check out. The vendor each sees their own separate orders, and they can authorize and capture the funds separately. And the buyer sees a single master order with chapters. So each chapter is a supplier they work with. And on the credit card statements, it'll show each vendor.
So let me ask a detail on that, just because, and I think I know the answer, but I'm just going to ask it for our listeners. So is there a limit to that? So let's say it's a marketplace transaction, and I'm just going. It's my work day today, and I'm just getting stuff done. You know, can I have 30, 40 different vendors potentially in this, one particular big mega transaction, and then I get all the other detail information and follow up, like this is getting delivered this week, this is next. Like, how is that structured?
Yeah, so just imagine having 30 different e-commerce sites bundled into one that shares the same cart. What's great is each vendor is merchant of record, so they own the transaction. They can capture a partial capture. And I could only do that actually thanks to your sponsor, which I discovered earlier this spring, was Balance. So a good plug there.
Why, thank you for that, John.
Yeah, tell us about Balance and how, I have to say, once again, this was not a shameless.
I know, honestly,
it's funny, right?
No, it really
my
wasn't.
business. I mean, yeah. I was having trouble with some other solutions to get this done, because what I wanted to do is have it so Goose is never involved in the transaction. So what happens is that any money from a buyer goes right from their credit card to the merchant processor, then right from the merchant processor to the vendor. It never hits us. We take our fee on the payout to the vendor on the back end.
And in this case, this is Balance.
That's Balance. Yeah. So what happens with Balance is that we're able to take one credit card sale on our platform. And if there's 30 vendors, what happens is they take that authorization, they clone that 30 times and set it up for a separate transaction for each vendor, and then authorize it and capture it separately. Same thing with net terms. We can offer net 60 terms to all our buyers, and we include that in our platform fee. So to the vendor, it doesn't matter if the customer pays by credit card or net 60. They get their money next day no matter what. And balance and their banks cover all that risks and transactions on the net 60 account. And unlike traditional net 60, that terms comes out 60 days after the transaction gets deducted from their bank accounts. And I believe they're using Plaid to keep everything transparent so that bank account information never gets sent over to either me or balance. Wow. So, I mean, I found them this past spring. Funny part is they actually reached out to me last year, right when I started Goose, trying to recruit me. And I was like, oh, no, I can't because I'm starting something. I didn't know what they were doing. They were kind of in stealth. And then when they came out of stealth, like, oh my God, this is going to solve my problem. And it saved me about $100,000 in development costs trying to build this with other platforms, because I tried to explain to people and no one got the fact that why would you not want to be in the transaction? You're a marketplace. You should take a percentage. Like, I don't want to be a marketplace. We're charging like literally 5% of a sale. That includes merchant fees and financing. So my margins are incredibly small, but I did that on purpose because B2B has to be transactional. And we do offer other options, a little more percentages, because another thing I found out was companies can't afford me, the ones that need me the most. So as an e-commerce manager, say if you're making $100,000, $150,000 a year, which is the average cost of an e-commerce manager these days, more so if you're an executive working with some of the great recruiters out there, and they can't afford them. So I said, hey, we have all these talented people out there, I mean, you guys probably included, who want to help these small brands who can't afford you. Mm-hmm. So I said, hey, let's combine a fractional e-commerce service with the marketplace. So I said, hey, why don't we make it so instead of paying 5%, that consulting can charge 7 to 10%, which is still a third of the price of other marketplaces, and they can manage it for them for percentage of sales. And that way they get ownership stake in the sales process. And it helps those brands who can't afford the initial outlay. And the guy goes, hey, if you're such a good e-commerce manager and you're getting 4% of every B2B sale, you better be really good, because if you are, you can make a ton of money on B2B. It's transactional. And then for the brand, that's still cheaper than spending 20, 30% or more on a wholesale two-step distributor.
Yeah. So tell us about what you think, obviously selling on Goose is a new, like, kind of awesome opportunity for people. So I hope from this podcast, you'll get more people that sign up. And to be clear, it's free to sign up, right? There's really no risk for them to sign up and list your product.
We're giving all of our onboarding tools, a basic CRM, all the live chat, all connections for free. And we have no lock-ins. So if they want to connect on Goose and sell off the platform, they're free to do so. We don't lock anybody in.
Yeah.
My goal is to make it so it's easy to transact if they want to do it on the platform. And that's the only cost, which is if they sell on the platform. Gotcha. And it's free for buyers, free for brands. Only cost is that percentage fee on sales on the platform.
So if you were a B2B company or selling B2B, and maybe you sell B2C and B2B, where do you think they should be, especially these smaller guys that can't afford a ton of e-commerce talent, do you think they should be focusing on the marketplaces? Do you think they should be building a big commerce site as well? Or, Magento site or whatever it is? Like, where would you
There's what they should be doing, and I think a reality around that, because the brands I'm seeing, especially the small ones, they're on every single marketplace, especially retail ones, because they're using it as a way to feed their funnel for sales. So they're trying to go where the customers are. Customers are getting then frustrated because different brands are in different marketplaces, and then it's the same problem with having multiple sites. And thankfully, I don't think you guys have any sponsors in the marketplace creation business. But there are a lot of software companies out there that are building SaaS tools or software tools to build a marketplace on top of Magento.
Yeah.
I won't go into any names because I don't want to call anybody out. But basically, they're trying to do is convince brands to launch their own drop shipping and marketplace account. What I see happening in D2C is also starting to happen in B2B, where everybody wants to build their own marketplace and sell everybody else's goods and drop ship it to provide a one-stop shop. Mm-hmm. In reality, what's happening is you're building the same problem with having 50 different e-commerce sites. You have 50 different marketplaces, and you're just creating fragmentation. So I think brands need to realize the value proposition they're giving to their partners and find ways to simplify things. Make it so that purchasing manager is not spending 30 hours a week doing visiting sites. They can work on what they do best, which is finding good new products and getting better prices than what they source. So they spend so much time doing admin tasks that they kind of just get stuck. So my thought process is that they really need to buckle down and finding ways to simplify things and look more long term instead of just doing like a scatter shotgun approach and trying to hit everywhere at every time.
So can you give an example of that? Would it be using something like a punch out to go and integrating with their customers and automating some of that, or how would you do that?
I love the plug there for the sponsor too as well. Yeah, so I think anything with punch out or anything with direct connection is better. I mean, if the systems can support direct API connections for B2B, it makes the most sense. And the reality is there's so many different systems out there. And the challenge even becomes, what if you have a great system and you're in the tire business and you can connect to tire manufacturers and order out your parts and pieces? What if you start doing farming implements as well, or some other kind of side business? Not only do you have a whole different vertical market to source from, whole different rules, whole different channel strategies, whole different technology sets. Because I'm guessing the ERP systems are commonplace in one industry, usually aren't in the next one.
No,
There's so much specialization. You probably see that all the time.
for sure.
Yeah. So I think there needs to be some kind of standardization. I mean, that's what EDI was supposed to be, a standardized format, but it is so expensive. It is so breakable now with the lack of standards and way it's implemented, with someone doing shipping confirmations, someone not doing ship information, someone doing catalog updates, someone not doing updates, and then pricing changes alone. It fills with huge amounts of dropout just due to pricing problems. You probably see it as well, again, when you're a consulting business, that pricing gets set from the ERP system to the customer has no way to see it. But in reality, the sales rep sends a price list every quarter. And then if the price goes up, that customer likes to say, oh, I never saw a pricing update. Here's my old price. Just to push that through because they can work the system. So there's lots of pricing credits and disparities. And if you try to do that in EDI, you'll get a mismatch and it'll fail every time.
Yeah.
So you see 60-70% dropouts.
That's what's interesting. Have you ever seen Connexium? You know, we've got a relationship with them and they seem to be doing a pretty good job trying to kind of like simplify and automate. You know, we had their CEO on. They basically just try and help automate the manual orders being placed and suck that data into the ERP or wherever it may go.
Well, there is with the OCR setups, and it's helping a little bit. But the problem, not so much technology, but it's the business rules. Because a lot of executives, I imagine, don't want to have pricing discrepancies. So like, oh, maybe less than 1%, but anything above that, then I don't want to go through. And so they give a tolerance. And the accounting managers say, hey, I don't want to have anything less than a penny because it'll mess up our accounting compliance costs. So the B2B problem is not really technology, it's more of corporate cultures. And it's all about inertia. And that's one thing I always push when I'm talking about Goose, is my challenge isn't just technology, it's how do I shift that cultural divide? And I call it conservation of work. So how do I get the work from that customer who's so used to emailing that order over to a sales rep, and it's a one click of a button for him and puts the work involved onto the sales rep and the supplier? How do you move that back to that buyer? How do you change that cultural and that habit problem? I mean, that's what it comes down to. I mean, in a perfect world, the data would just flow back and forth. And OCR and machine learning can help with some of that stuff, but you always have the edge cases. And those edge cases, because of the complexities, are always a non-inconsequential amount. So it might be 20-30% of orders fall out. And then the money you're supposed to save by cutting back in customer service staff to pay for that expensive SaaS product, you still need to keep. And then you're having two cost centers. And then this increases the cost of processing even more.
Well, you know, I'm sorry, Josh, go ahead.
No, that's fine.
No, I think I just wanted to jump on one of the things that you said there about, you know, culture. You know, that's come up a lot in our conversations. I mean, over our episodes, it's probably been the majority of them. And I have to say, in you know, a lot of the relationships I have and, you know, the conversations I have outside of this podcast, it does end up with that. I mean, I think for a time there was an assumption that, you know, tech was going to solve our problems, or, you know, that's all we needed to do for transformation is, you know, just apply the right tech and tools and off we go. But obviously that's not the case. I mean, there are so many questions about business culture. And again, I'm going to credit, you know, the pandemic a little bit, for accelerating a lot of these conversations, because assumptions changed. You couldn't just keep going necessarily the way that you were in almost any business anywhere for a while. You had to kind of question things and wonder, why are we doing it this way, and how could it be done better? And so I think that the cultural piece is something our listeners really, circle back to over and over again. It's not just the tech, it is really about culture and really how we change things going forward for B2B.
So right there, I think that touches on one other kind of e-commerceism I like to tout as my rules of e-commerce, is that whenever I find a problem in e-commerce, especially in B2B, 9 times out of 10, it's not the e-commerce's fault. I mean, we've seen it all the time. Everybody's here nodding. So we see a problem with the website. We see a problem with the functionality. It's not the e-commerce site. It's usually something downstream. Yep. And the same thing happens with customer orders, non-e-commerce. So you go back to the cultural issue, and those cultural issues arise because even personally, when I was running a retail dealer business online, I would email orders over to one of my specific suppliers because I know the processes were so broken. I needed the confirmation from a rep that the products were in stock, could ship, and the pricing was right. Just because I know that the systems are broken. And that's just inertia. I mean, there are so many companies out there, and I've worked for a couple of them in my past, where I think they exist only because they have that inertia. I mean, their customer service and the options of the customers are a little bit limited sometimes, but they become embedded in these companies so much so that even if that company hates the processes involved, they have to stick with it because they make money on it. Now, you don't want to hate it, how cumbersome it is, how backwards, they can still make money on it, and they don't want to change it because by changing it, there's risk involved.
So I think you said something really interesting right there, because I truly believe that those days are numbered. And I think Brian Beck is a big advocate of that. If you read his book, $1 Billion B2B Commerce, the days are numbered. He thinks there'll be a point where you fall too far behind in e-commerce and B2B, and your processes are so old and annoying for people that eventually the inertia stops and people have kind of migrated to this new e-commerce world and want the shopping experience, or things like balance get better and all these things get more and more advanced, and it's easier to buy online for B2B, right?
I think in an idealized world, he's correct on that, but in reality, I don't believe so. Just to the fact, the inertia and human nature, because again, you can have the greatest B2B commerce site out there, have all the product data content, you're using Salsify, everything's A+ level on your website, your marketplaces everywhere. But if your workload is still easier for that customer to do a PDF export from their system and send it over to the sales rep, and the stuff not e-commerce is still broken to require that happening, then it's still going to keep on going. Because again, e-commerce is there to make things simpler, but it's business. And if I'm a rep and I want to say, hey, I want to order $10 million worth of equipment, and I have my customer who says, I need this in 2 days, and I know my supplier can deliver it, but I need to make sure they can, I am not going to trust that to an e-commerce system unless I have that confidence that it's going to process correctly. And that curve and that risk is what's going to delay a lot of the adoption in these industries. They'll use it, but the trust factor isn't there.
Well, yeah, and I agree with you to some extent, but don't you think that the companies that start to get better and better at e-commerce will be the ones that become more and more trustworthy because they have better systems, better operations, better logistics, and then eventually they take over more market share?
I think at some point, I think I've seen 100-year-old companies that are still doing it badly, and they try to innovate for the sake of these innovations to accommodate that. But you've seen it as well, I'm sure, and I hate saying that again, but in the reality in e-commerce space, you go into a business, you just do discovery, find out what they're doing. They say they want to do the transformation, they want to spend the money, but they never want to break processes. They're not involved in e-commerce to make the e-commerce work because it's working for them, and they have 100 manual processes that may or not be documented because Joe's done this for 30 years and it just works. Or they have spreadsheets galore with so many pivot tables, it looks like a plumbing works factory. It's just too much of a lift. And the disruption of the business, unless you have a very aggressive thought leadership at the top to push that through, it's going to be a long, drawn-out process. And honestly, some of the older tech, I think, was simpler for B2B commerce. I had a distributor called ScanSource a number of years ago that had a text-based ordering system. And it was great because I can log in. It was almost a green screen on the web. I could quickly see prices of 50 different products, order multiple stuff to my cart, check out in about 2 minutes max. It was super quick for huge orders. It switched to a modern e-commerce type platform with categories and images and rich content, and it slowed me down considerably. I was doing a third of the capacity I could do before an order entry, just because it was new and it was savvy. If I had better integration, it slowed down the procurement process. And that's what people need to understand, is that it's not about being flashy. It's like, how can you make that workload simpler? It's in reality, it's not B2C. The reality of you convincing a procurement manager to upsell them on a product or cross-sell them on something new, it's an edge case, in my opinion.
I agree.
It's most likely they go through there and they have a list of products they have to order for their either if it's an integrator, their job teams need it, if it's a retailer based on their inventory, and they don't make the decisions. They're just doing order entry. They want to get that process and get it simple and keep the costs down.
I think one of the things, though, that I would say is, and people are struggling with the right terminology for what this is, but I've heard mediated commerce or mediated e-commerce as a term. And I kind of like the concept, because basically what it means is that, you know, you're constantly looking for opportunities to innovate and use appropriate new technologies or whatever. But the mediation piece means that there are still people involved at the appropriate steps of the process, you know, including, let's say, you're bringing in your customer, your client, to understand exactly what it is that they want, what they're looking for. Because like what you brought up here about the text-based ordering, you know, if I were in charge of a project there, it would have been nice to know that we were losing something while we were gaining something else, right? You know, that we're losing this ability to do something really quickly in a text-based fashion. So that's kind of where, you know, and again, this is B2C also. B2C is doing this as well, especially a lot of the big old retailers who had these disjointed e-commerce approaches and then tried to figure out how to knit it all together. There's a certain mediation to each piece of this where they're working with their customer base, they're working with all this tech, and they're saying, well, what exactly, where do people need to be in order to make this work better?
That's why I think personas are important when understanding B2B. Because in B2C, it's all about either need or want. So I want a new t-shirt, I need something to be blue, or I need a plumbing fixture to fix something that's broken. B2B, it's like 90% what I need, and it's very regimented. So there might be an ordering process, which is all about procurement. They just want to get in done. There might be a discovery piece as well. So a different persona of a user may come on board saying, hey, I want to discover new suppliers. I want to discover new products where I can improve my business. But them overlapping at the same time, it might be rare. So you need to account for both. So what works for a procurement person will not work for the decision maker. So there almost needs to be two different sides, I think, or ways of thinking on this. Mm-hmm. And when I see that happening in companies, especially in B2B, you have sales and marketing, which sees e-commerce as a way, oh, I can increase my customer sales, I can hit attachment rates, I can get more lines per ticket. And the IT and procurement says, oh, I can simplify the order management process and not have my inside sales reps doing data entry and have them actually doing outbound sales calls and do things. And it never lines up. And everybody's expectations saying, hey, we have a $20 million B2B commerce channel now. I want it to $30 million. I'm like, well, are you going to give me more customers? No, we just want those same customers to buy more. I'm like, well, they're not going to buy more because you're not doing sales efforts to give them any more demand generation. And by the way, I've worked.
Yeah, why are they going to buy more? Yeah.
Exactly. They think there's some magical e-commerce fairy that's going to give them more sales. The worst thing, though, is when I see B2B or even B2C companies that want to do digital transformation and do e-commerce. And okay, I want to go from a $5 million channel to a $50 million channel a year and grow it. I'm like, okay, great. So maybe we have a good site to do it. Then here's demand generation. We can find new leads. Have you done any forecasting for your raw goods? Make sure you can build that many. Oh, no, not yet. Can your warehouse handle that volume? Do you have enough pick and pack lines? Well, we have LTL. Well, you can't do LTL for pick and pack for a parcel. Oh, we had to look at that. So it's they see this as a magical panacea still. And that comes down to education, which I'm glad you guys are doing podcasts and help educating people, because I think commerce, especially a little bit on D2C still, unfortunately, there's this mystery around it and this buzzword saying, hey, everybody else is doing it, so we have to do it. And they hire experts in and they want to get the results. But again, it's never about the e-commerce. What website they use, what software they use, what platform they use, what UX they use, doesn't matter if their ERP can't handle it, if their warehouse management systems can't do it, if they can't do the right wave planning to do the right picking for next day shipment promises. I mean, there's so many different parts of it. And 9 times out of 10 from the projects I've been on, and I've been on quite a few, those people are never involved in the conversation. The only time I had success in projects when I physically had to drive out to different plants and warehouses and talk to shipping managers, demand planners, product managers, and ask those questions because nobody else was.
Yeah. So this is kind of a change gears a little bit, but I completely agree. The ERP seems to be the backbone of most of these companies, and I don't see that changing, right? Like you need an ERP system, you know, they need some sort of master system to kind of manage the business, right? Like how else are they going to manage all this complexity? So whether it's SAP or Microsoft Dynamics or, you know, any of these popular ERP systems, they're generally on one of those, sometimes bespoke, and that's kind of the master system on the back end. What I'm actually kind of leaning more towards in B2B, and we're actually architecting a project right now for this, is I think there's a lot of opportunity to build essentially a headless, like React kind of user experience that could be thought out and architected based on their business requirements, based on, all right, let's focus on the procurement customer, let's focus on discovery, and just tie directly to the ERP. And the ERP is essentially the back end and the database, and kind of bypass a lot of these e-commerce platforms. The problem is, to your point, if they don't have a modern e-commerce ERP, or their ERP data is crap, or the APIs aren't good enough, it's challenging to do that, right? Like you need kind of modern REST APIs to do that well, or ideally even like GraphQL, which most of these things don't have, you know.
Well, I think you still need that platform there as a mediator, because even if they have a great ERP system, which I've never seen because every company customizes it and they start going down legacy processes and can't do a lot of changes because they're getting to the point where they're working around what their ERP can do, not the ERP working for them, is that a lot of times the responsiveness of the ERP system can't handle real-time pricing, can't handle the real-time data needs. So you need to cache that, or even if you're using Dell Boomi to real-time integration, it works great in theory, but in reality, as you've seen, I'm sure it can be cumbersome. So there needs to be caching or updates, or if they're updating pricing once every 60 days, do they need real-time integration? Or is it better just to have that cached in the e-commerce platform? Yeah. I mean, I built Magento sites for enterprise, and we overrun most of the functionality of Magento, and it came right from the ERP system. But we needed to have that middle connection as a fallback, saying, hey, if I can't get a response back from that ERP in 3 seconds, I need to go to a caching system, because otherwise that spinner is going to kill the site and customers get frustrated and they'll never use it.
But don't you think it would make more sense to build a simpler bespoke caching system for their specific needs than having this whole separate expensive software?
It really depends, because once you start doing that, then you're supporting a custom code base, building that up as opposed to standard. And that has its own challenges, having to maintain that. Because then what if that person developed it leaves? Is it going to be standardized enough to go back? And ideally that would be the case, but unless that company has a very strict standards compliance and documents everything, then it becomes a tribal knowledge problem all over again. Yeah. And that's what happens with the ERP system. Hey, we need this custom thing for us. We'll build this module on top of SAP or JD Edwards. And then 20 years later, they're still using it, and that person retired. And they say, okay, how are we going to find someone who knows RPG, that knows how to use this IBM mainframe, who can fix this module, keep it running? And where can we go to some recycling company to get an IBM part to keep this server running? Because otherwise, this one software will break. I mean, these are real world things that are happening, because you have to think that this process may not be changed for 5 or 10 years, especially in a mid-sized enterprise, just because they're putting their capital needs so much towards other things right now with lean processes or trying to do inventory management, and they don't want to put the money into these bug fixes, which may not affect them for 5 or 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. The problem though that I see is that what ends up happening is they end up getting stuck on these platforms and they end up getting so customized and
Yep.
kind of battered around trying to, use the ERP to overwrite things that you end up getting to a point where it's almost worse in some cases than just having a custom site because you've kind of tried to do what the platform was not really designed to do, right? And then
you just proved the need right there for Goose, because we're saying, hey, get rid of platforms altogether. I mean, that's what Amazon or eBay should have been. It should be a way for one centralized place where you can sell the products. It's the same for everybody. You own the transaction, and you just pay a small fee on the transaction to do so. And 15-20% is never going to work. That's why we picked 5% to keep it free or close to free as possible, and have them own the data. I mean, that's, to me, that's why I built it. And whether it's successful or not is hasn't been seen yet. But I think it needs to be some kind of agnostic, standardized way to get around having to build custom sites for everywhere. I mean, you guys are in a development shop, so that's your business. But how many times do you guys build almost the exact same solution with some tweaks for 50 different vendors over and over again, same type of needs? Saying, why not just do it once? Have everybody on the same thing. They control their part of it. Customers are happy. You're happy. It's standardized. And whether they like it or not, they have best practices enforced. And it'll force them to do good practices and hopefully trickle down in their business.
Yeah, we're seeing that more on Shopify. I mean, Shopify for us has been pretty repeatable. I mean, obviously there's some customizations, but most of that is B2C and retail, and that's pretty repeatable. And I think that market is kind of standardizing more and more around Shopify.
Yep.
But B2B just hasn't really found that, right? It's more fragmented. See all these random small B2B e-commerce platforms. But I think ultimately these companies still want some brand experience, right? Like if, they still want their own website, they want their own ordering portal. They're going to want that for the foreseeable future. So it's a question of how do they build that?
You said right there, that's what the brand wants. I mean, it's okay to have your own marketing stuff, but for ordering, it's not what the customers want. And that's why Amazon's so big, because it's secure.
True.
One place to order stores your card information, and they have the trust factor. That's Amazon's win, and why people will take chances on no-name DTC brands out of Asia, because it's on Amazon and they trust Amazon. Mm-hmm. Right now in the B2B space, nobody trusts their suppliers because there's been so many pain points and frictions in the past that they won't trust the purchase so much, because it's not about a need or want. This is about them servicing their customer and affects their livelihood as a business. Because B2B is not about selling products, it's about making money for them. So you have to become ingrained as much as possible if you're a provider, and you have to build that trust. When I first started Goose, I almost started calling it a trust platform, because my goal is to make it so that the buyers and sellers trust each other and trust me. And that's why I give ownership completely of the customer to that brand. Yeah. So in reality, we're never involved in the transaction. We're just facilitating it. Customer service, returns, ordering, everything goes towards directly from the vendor to the buyer. Yeah. So it's not about trusting us, it's about trusting themselves.
So I want to circle back to Goose specifically now, for the tail end of our episode. So tell me where you envision things, and you could plot this out any way that you like. I mean, a year from now, where do you think Goose will be? And is there sort of a bigger picture of more things that you want to do with Goose other than this sort of model that you have in place right now? So where do you think Goose is going to be in 2022 at this time?
See, I want Goose ideally to be an agnostic, simple platform that gets out of the way. So I want to be the first choice of a brand wanting to sell B2B. Long term, my goal is not so much around the transactions, it's around those connections, the changing the culture, and the data points. Because right now, if a brand is selling two-step distribution, a lot of cases I've been in a situation where I didn't know who my dealers were. That distributor would never give me customer lists or tell me who they were buying my products. They'd pass on marketing materials and MBF funds for me, but they wouldn't tell me who my customers were. And even worse, if I got POS data, I never knew what those customers were buying besides my product. So my goal is to make it so with Goose, where brand A could get POS data from their cart and show, hey, they're buying 50 of my widget. And Goose could say, hey, you know what? they're buying 50 your widget and they're buying 20 of a kayak paddle. And I can say, hey, why is my customer buying kayak paddles as my product? And then I can start building personas of my customers based on what they're buying, because I own that customer now and I get basic data of everywhere else. And that's things that you can't get in the channel now. No one wants to give up control. And I'm doing everything opposite what I see other people doing. I'm not charging a lot of money. I'm going low. I'm not locking people in my platform. I'm staying open. Everybody says to me, like, well, what if they use your platform to find a customer, then they buy off the platform and you don't get a percentage? Like, well, if that was the case, then they would have done so no matter what in other places. I'm just not creating this artificial barrier. I mean, you can try to police it, but then you're policing your customers. And why are you being agnostic? Antagonizing that. I'm saying just B2B has to be transparent, has to be simple, and get out of the way. And until other companies start realizing that, and then whether or not Goose is successful or not, I honestly believe that this is the model going forward for B2B. It has to be centralized, has to be simple, and it has to have ownership. So thanks to Balance, your sponsor there, I think I have a pathway to do that. And again, whether Goose is successful or not, I'm hoping that we can have an impact. And at the very least, we're creating conversation and educating people, because 95% of people I talk to have either one, no idea what B2B commerce is, or understand like, oh, that's a problem. And 50% of people I talk to sign up, even cold emails. Is that, hey, that's a great idea.
That's remarkable, actually. That's quite a takeaway too. I mean, it's that compelling. I mean, it sounds compelling on its face. Everything you say is so compelling, but to actually have 50%.
Well, there's no risk involved, so we don't charge anything, and they own the customers. They're like, no one else is doing that. Why? And it makes them start thinking like, why am I giving my customers to Amazon, Amazon's customer, or why am I giving it to Fair or Tundra and they own the customer? I actually own the customer. It's my customer, and that alone is the key. I think is that brands want control and ownership, and that's why the channel exists. And my pie in the sky goal is to make it so that the need for two-step distribution is drastically minimized. Because what we're doing here at its core is I'm trying to separate the sales portion of a transaction from the logistics part of it. So with us, you can have someone buy on Goose if you're a brand owner and own the transaction, own the customer data, have full contact control of them, you can push them marketing information, chat with them, everything you need to do, and you separate that from logistics. So because logistics is always separate, I can use a 3PL, I can use a distributor and just move boxes. I don't need to have a marketplace control all that. I can choose how I want to ship it and fulfill that order, either through distribution, 3PLs, or whatever means I want to do it. But all my interactions, even someone down to a dealer level, is direct. I know who they are, I see the data, I control who can buy and sell, I set the pricing, I set the shipping costs, the buyer gets all their benefits, and it keeps things simple. So I now have the ability to do different types of business models where I can have a distributor, and instead of them owning the sale and then selling their white label products instead, just saying, no, I don't think to move boxes. They're going to hate this, but that's the pathway.
So I'm going to interject, and I'm going to thank you because I have to leave. I apologize to our listeners, but I booked something that's about 3 minutes away that I needed to do. Isaiah, I'm going to let you continue with Josh, and this is great. I'm really
thank you so much.
Yeah,
I'm going to talk to you guys later.
I have one last question, Tim. Thank you for joining, but I want to hear one last question, Josh. With what you're saying, do you think that the days of the traditional distributor, where it's manufacturer, distributor, retailer, and consumer, are going away or will go away? Do you think it's going to go manufacturer, retailer, consumer?
I think it depends on the industry, honestly.
Yeah, let's say like in the future, 10 years, I don't know, you know.
It's really dependent on the industry and how well the logistics networks are set up. Because right now, a lot of those distributors are providing last mile delivery systems. So they're saying, hey, I might have 10,000 locations across the country and I can get to the retailer store in 2 hours. A lot of manufacturers can't meet that kind of logistics needs, so it has a value. Some industries like security, that distributor may have taken on extra services for value add and say, hey, we're providing engineering services or that kind of stuff. Those type of things will continue. What I'm trying to do is make it so that sales relationship is separate from that, so that brand really owns that relationship with their sellers, or at least has more transparency. I mean, in an ideal world, I'd love to replace two-step distributors, but I think the reality is they have so many touch points. And realistically, for the short term, no brand's going to try to piss off their distribution customers because they don't want to kill that business.
But what about
It's kind of a gradual process.
What if they eventually get to the point where the 3PLs are so efficient? They can plug into a 3PL that has, 500 warehouses and then just sell directly to the retailer.
I think there's a possibility because if you think about it, and one of the things that I was trying to do when I was building Goose is look at what does a distributor provide, since I've worked with many of them, is they're providing the customer service management. They're providing the logistics service. They're providing the data services to the dealers, and they're acting as a bank. There's a fifth one that you could say they're arguing that they're doing some kind of channel stuffing and saying, hey, we're holding inventory in the channel so they don't have to stock it, or they can realize that sales early, depending how they do the financials. But what I do with Goose is I try to say, okay, we can handle the sales connection because right now, a lot of manufacturers use a distributor because they can't handle the onboarding and management of 1,000 dealers. So I say, how do I make that simple with onboarding and a basic CRM? Keep that part of it going. Data management, create data feeds, or use Salsify or a technology platform, not really an issue anymore because you can automate that. Well, logistics part, you can solve with 3PL, easy, if you have the wherewithal, or you expand your distribution network to be a little more regionalized and manage your stock levels better. And the big one for us was the financing part. And that's one reason we partnered with Balance again, because with the ability to factor those transactions. So a manufacturer doesn't want to carry the risk of net 60 terms from 1,000 small dealers. It's just too risky, and the cash flow management becomes insane. So if you can fix that and do like some of the other retail companies are doing, but owning the transaction and providing a factoring service, where we can say, hey, for the same cost as a credit card, we'll factor the transaction at 60. We'll take all that risk involved. You get your money next day, no matter what. And then the benefits of that distributor start fading away. And that's my challenge right now is how do you advocate for that and get that out there? And it's a lot to take in, especially if you're not in the B2B space. But that's what we're trying to do, because if you hit all those touch points, the value prop of that distributor goes down. And every vendor I've talked with has a love-hate relationship with distributors because, one, they like getting their products out there, but more and more now, those distributors are making their own white label products and competing against them. And because they own the customer, they're going to say, hey, why buy this brand name tire when I have this generic tire from us? It's $2 cheaper and you can make more margin. So what are they going to pick?
Yeah. So one thing we can say is that the manufacturing is definitely not going away.
Yeah.
So that's the piece that'll be there. It's a question of what is the path from these products to the end use. Where's the end use end up, and what's that path? And that path, I think we agree is going to change. It's just a question of how long it takes and how it changes, right? And hopefully you guys are the ones that change it, right?
I'm hoping so.
Well, yeah, thanks so much for having us on, for joining. I'd love to have you back, give you some time, maybe 6 to 12 months, and hopefully you have a lot more, traction and interesting stories about the platform to share.
Well, glad to come back and share our journey. We've been sharing everything on LinkedIn. I've posted every step of the way of our process. I've even shared financials, how much I've spent on development, how much I spent on business stuff. So I've got a decent sized following now on LinkedIn and following along. And I get emails every day and messages saying, hey, I love what you're doing. I'm just following along. I just wanted to say hi, because people want to see that. They want to see that it's possible to build something like that. And whether you fail, whether you make it, they want to see steps along the way, and so they can say, hey, this is a real person too. It's not just some big company that popped up. They can say, hey, I know this guy struggled. I know this guy had successes. And they can see that it's authentic.
Yeah, I love that. So follow Josh Penfold. Is it Penfold? Sorry if I'm not saying that right.
Penfold.
Yeah, follow Josh Penfold on LinkedIn, because I agree that I like following you, seeing the updates, and for anyone that's either trying to become an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur, I think it's just good to see the struggle, because it's not an easy path, as we both know.
Yeah, just shoot me a message on LinkedIn if you can find me, and I'm glad to help mentor other small businesses. I've been doing it for a number of years now, because I've gotten a lot of benefits from being on LinkedIn and the communities, especially the startup scene. And it's always important to give back as well. So I'm always glad to offer mentoring and help other startup founders as well. So feel free to reach out, and glad to help out.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Josh.